with me, guys. I'm just going to share my screen here with you. So
sorry, Paul, before we start there, the session will be recorded, so we'll just let our guests know as well. So the session will be recorded tonight. Thank you.
okay, so Maggie, maybe you just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Yeah, that's perfect. So again, as Maggie says, welcome everybody here this evening. I'm not going to go through the usual starting point of an introduction. I suppose if you want to check that out, you can check out on the notes for the webinar. But we're all here this evening for one reason. Unfortunately, coronavirus has taken a grip of the whole world, and probably more so why we're on here is because it's taken over the kind of sporting world. Okay. I'm aware that the demographic in front of me tonight is quite mixed. So we have loads of sports and we have a mixture of trainers, we have a mixture of athletes, we have a mixture of different age grades. So tonight's going to be quite general in the sense that I'm not going to talk about any one sport. But hopefully there'll be plenty of takeaways for an individual to go back to their sport. Maybe apply some of the methods or the practical take-homes that I'm going to talk about tonight to apply to your own training. Okay. First thing we're going to talk about is all sports is going to require a certain amount of athletic qualities. Okay. So we're going to identify those first and foremost. Again, every sport will have a mixture of those. We're going to talk about what your season might look like. As well as knowing what your season is going to look like, we're going to talk a wee bit about planning from here on in for the rest of your season. We'll talk about why we train and why we're still training. Basically what we're trying to do there is we're trying to retain those athletic qualities that we're going to talk about at the start. You as athletes or you as trainers now, what really should you be focusing on? And again, this is probably a mixture of evidence-based and anecdotal, given that we've come through a couple of these lockdown phases already in elite sport. And then I'll just give a couple of examples of each of these qualities as well, and how you as an athlete or you as a trainer might prescribe to train these qualities, and what kind of, what you have to think about when you're training these qualities. So no matter what sport you're into, and whether it be a trainer or an athlete yourself, you should be aware that your sport requires a certain amount of athletic quality or athletic capabilities. Okay. And again, these are just a few to name in terms of, you could add in specifics if you really wanted to go down that pigeonhole. Okay. So we're talking mainly about mobility, speed, agility, strength, power, and conditioning. But center to all that there is going to come back to you. Okay. You as an athlete or you as a trainer to a specific sport, your main athletic quality is the fundamental and sport specific movement skills. So that's required in your sport. Okay. So bear that in mind. No matter what we're talking about in terms of athletic qualities, I want you to try and relate it back to your sport. I'm not talking about any one sport in particular. Okay. So a typical season is essentially made up of 3 phases. Okay. So we usually have an off season. We usually have our pre-season training block, and then we go into competition. Sometimes, depending on your sport, you might have a couple of pre-seasons. You might even have more than a couple. Where we're left now at the minute, unfortunately, is we are stuck in this off-season mode. We are in the middle of a massive off-season. Not every sport is guaranteed or knows exactly when the pre-season is going to be just yet. So that's why I've kind of highlighted that we're essentially stuck in off-season mode here. Okay. So a lot of my focus tonight is going to talk about what you could be doing in off-season to get you ready for your pre-season. Obviously, that's going to lead into your competitive phase then. Okay. But again, this is really just to highlight and identify what part of the season we're currently in. When we look at topical planning, what we usually do is we split our year into a phase where you get prepared for competition. Okay, so we're in that phase right now where we're preparing. Okay, we're training to train. We're not actually competing in our sport now. Okay. When we break down that preparation phase, okay, there's obviously 2 elements to that. And again, we're going to fall heavily on one side of that quite now. We're going to be stuck in that general preparation again, because if we go too early under specific preparation, obviously we don't know when that pre-competitive or that competitive phase is coming up. All right. So again, that is essentially our off season. That's where we focus on general preparation. Once you get through your general preparation, you start getting a bit more specific. That turns into your pre-season. So again, that might be, again, an individual sport, or might be a team sport. That will be identified in the coming months when that period is going to be for you. And obviously that will transpire into a competition phase then, okay? But again, the highlight for this evening and going forward, and the qualities and how we're going to train them, I'm essentially going to be talking about, we're in an off season now at the minute, okay? So if we're in an off season, why are we training at all? Okay, and I've heard this, and people have come back to me on a few topics on this. Essentially, we have a training residual, or we can retain a certain amount of our athletic qualities, but we can only keep them for so long. Okay, and again, this is why we need to train these qualities. It's the age-old saying, don't use it, you lose it. Okay, so there's certain qualities we want to obviously train, and these should be trained essentially all year round if we want to try and keep a grip of them, all right? The first one there, and again, you can see that you'll start losing maximal speed, okay, as a fitness component, if you're not training it within 5 days of each bout, okay? So essentially what that means is you're probably going to want to be training every couple of weeks. You're going to want to be hitting a maximal speed type session once a week, okay? Again, what that means is that you're retaining that quality. Again, what that means going forward is that you won't lose any of your maximum speed that you've developed over maybe, you know, the off season or coming off the back of your sport. Again, without going into too much detail, all those qualities requires a certain amount of days to retain, okay? So again, your strength endurance will require top-ups. Again, not as dramatic, okay, or as exaggerated as your maximal speed, but again, every 18 days or so, you're going to want to have an exposure to strength endurance, i.e., your body will start losing that quality if you don't expose your body to it. Once you expose your body to it, you adapt, and then that stimulus is, I suppose, it just kicks off again, okay? That quality is always going to be there. You can see that a lot of people spend a lot of the time in pre-season and off-season training developing two qualities that actually you can retain quite easily, or not quite easily, but you can retain longer, okay? And that is your maximal strength and aerobic endurance. Okay, people probably like training those qualities a bit more than maybe the likes of your speed, but we can retain those qualities easier, i.e. we don't have to train them as often as your maximal speed or your strength endurance. So going forward, in terms of how you stagger, how you put your order of fitness training or your strength training, maybe have a think about that speed block, okay? Where does that take priority in your training week or your training cycle or your training block in this off season? Yes, it's off season, but you still need to train it. Again, if we were to break the season up now and we look back to those athletic qualities that I talked about, in the off season, our specificity, i.e. how much it resembles our sport, it can afford to be quite low, okay? So when it's low, it means, you know, it's that general preparation. Again, we're not looking to be too specific, i.e. we're not looking to go out and match the demands of your exact sport, okay? We're on the other end of the spectrum, away from that, all right, from your competitive phase, you can see on the right-hand side. So what does that mean for all our qualities? What do we need to be doing with these qualities now in the off-season? So again, strength and power we've identified, we still need to retain it, but we can retain that using medium intensity type methods, i.e. you don't have to be going and chasing your rep maxes, or you don't need to be going for a massive block of development work there in terms of try to PB or try to PR in the weight room or on the pitch if it's speed work of it for that case, okay? You just need to maintain this. Okay, so your strength and power, speed, they're all going to be maintained or retained at a medium intensity. The other specifics then of, I suppose, the athletic qualities is going to be your hypertrophy, which is essentially gaining muscle size. For some athletes and some sports, the off-season is a priority time of the year to do that, okay? I'm a wee bit conscious of who I'm speaking to in terms of maybe the age grades. I would be focusing here more on the adult athlete in terms of chasing that hypertrophy or going after hypertrophy in your off-season. If you're a minor, I would be advocating just stick with your strength training. Let the size be a byproduct of your strength. Just train for strength and you will get bigger as your training age develops. The other thing to focus on maybe is your sport. So again, if your position requires you to carry muscle mass in bulk, maybe like the certain positions in rugby requires you to have a certain amount of hypertrophy or muscle mass. Of course, the off season is a great time to develop that. Again, because you're not focusing on collisions or contacts, or you're not focusing on any other really major component. One that I'll touch on tonight, and again, it's probably the best time to get this done now, because when you go in season, there's only a medium focus in terms of in your pre-season, and it's something you can only maintain, and it's something that's hard to maintain when you're in a competitive phase, and that's your injury prevention type work, okay, your prehab type work. And I'll just talk about a few basics around that. Again, I'm not going to go into massive detail. And we'll finish off and we'll look at what kind of stuff you can be doing with your plyometrics training. Again, focus at this stage in your off season. Again, I tend to focus more on extensive type patterns, okay? You're not going with max effort or max intent. And we focus a lot on your landing around this time as well, okay? The last one, as I said, we'll touch on will be your conditioning, where we'll look at more, again, your aerobic development. Again, we talked about you only have to, you can retain it for every 30 days. So we'll talk about what type of aerobic training you might be able to do and mix and match now in the off season to get the best of it. So injury prevention, and again, that'll be the last time I'll probably say the word prevention, because unfortunately I've been in sport long enough. A lot of use have probably come through injuries. Injuries cannot be prevented. It's part and parcel of the game. It's part and parcel of the demands of your sport. So essentially what we do when we talk about prehab is we're trying to reduce the risk of picking up an injury, okay? Whereas we're probably never going to prevent them, unfortunately. So research has shown that an athlete who completes a high percentage of their pre-season significantly reduces the risk of picking up an in-season injury. The reason I've highlighted that is why your off-season is quite important, and why you have to train well in your off-season is because most athletes now is going to go into a very, very short and condensed pre-season block, and you're not going to afford to pick up an injury in pre-season. And any other season, based on the research, again, it can play havoc. You can miss, the first phase of your competitive season if you pick up enough injury in pre-season. So your off-season is going to be your building blocks, your foundations going into a good pre-season. Obviously, if you come through a good pre-season, you're giving yourself every chance of coming through healthy and not picking up an injury, okay? So again, it just, I suppose, goes back to that point, why are we training in the off-season? And again, it's very, very important, obviously, going forward into your pre-season. I always say it, your best ability as an athlete is availability, okay? So again, that will hammer home the point of how important your prehab is in terms of keeping on top of your niggles and your injuries. So where do you start in terms of your prehab? And again, there's going to be no general consensus here of where to start. The first thing you're going to have to look at is do a bit of a needs analysis around your sport. Every sport will have common or will have injuries that, there's higher incidence of. Okay, so again, in field sports, that tends to be hamstring injuries, for example. So again, whatever sport you're in, whether you're be hiking, whether you're just a gym goer, if you're a recreational runner, if you're an elite runner, whatever your sport common injuries is, that is where you're going to start. As well as that, if you have had any previous injuries, definitely going to be another point you want to focus on, because one of the biggest, I suppose, things to predispose you to a new injury will be a previous injury, okay? So again, those are the two things, your common injuries in your sport and your previous injuries. Most people will address those based on, I suppose, evidence and anecdotally. Now, we're going to, or how we prevent these injuries or how we reduce the risk of injuries is increase their range of movement or mobility if it's lacking, and this new craze or this new phase now on working the tissue tolerance and tissue quality, okay? So what we're talking about there is the health of your ligaments, your tendons, right into those attachment points under your muscles, okay, and then your muscle itself, all those tissues. How are they going to tolerate your pre-season training load now off the back of your pre-season? Are you going to be strong enough? Are you going to be robust? Are you going to be resilient enough for your pre-season training based off some of the prehab stuff you're going to talk about? So to highlight where you want to be mobile, I'm just going to bring up, this is essentially a graph taken from Michael Boyle and Gray Cook's work. It's known as the joint by joint approach. Okay, basically all it does is highlight areas where you want to be mobile and some areas you want to be stable. Again, it's quite important for athletes to know this in terms of areas to focus on, okay? Because some people can get caught up in areas that maybe is not relevant, all right? So you can see here in terms of if we want to try and create an athlete who's mobile, I tend to focus on the three big areas, okay? And that tends to be the ankle, your hips, and your T-spine. It's essentially catching them all, okay? And again, this is sort of coming off the back of in a sport that involves contacts and overhead sports, but I wouldn't be as concerned with the, I suppose, the shoulder if I have enough range of movement in your thoracic spine or your T-spine there, okay? The ankle is one I think it needs a bit more time and care than a lot of people give it, because essentially our body is just linked. It's just one chain there. And what I find is that people are lacking that range of movement through their ankle, and it might not be their own fault. It might be because of previous injury. They might have to wear strapping, which obviously immobilizes a bit. But again, if you're lacking that range of movement from your ankle, unfortunately, the body doesn't know to go to the hip to try and find that range. It just goes to the next joint. And you can see straight away your knee as a stable joint, or it's meant to be a stable joint. So again, the prevalence and I suppose the incidence rate of ACLs has gone through the roof in all sports in recent years. So again, by promoting, I suppose, a nice, healthy and a symmetrical range of movement at your ankle, it may actually limit some of the knock-on effect of maybe knee injuries, okay? Again, a simple thing to do in terms of, number one, testing your range of movement around your ankle and obviously training it is a simple knee-to-wall test, okay? So this is just obviously an image I've taken. I didn't want to take the risk of putting in any videos in case they paused or anything on me. But essentially all we're looking for here is that athlete here has their front foot, which is a nice stable joint, in contact with the floor, and you're trying to focus on keeping your heel on the floor while you try and touch the knee off the wall, okay? The thing you want to look out for here is that distance there, okay? Ideally, you want to be able to, you know, to be a healthy range across most sports, you want to be probably between 10 and 12 centimeters in there, okay? And the other thing to look out for is your left and right the same, okay? Are they symmetrical? Again, if they're not, that test is as much as an exercise also, where you can use it to improve your knee to wall or your mobility off your ankle by just pushing your knee to your wall. It's a great wee exercise just to throw on in your warm-up phase. When we talk about moving through the hips, there's all different, I suppose, planes of movement that we could talk about. We could talk about, you know, your flexion and extension patterns, your abduction and adduction. A great exercise I find that targets a lot of those movements. So it's your flexion, your extension, your adduction, abduction, internal, external rotation is this 90-90 hip flow, or this 90-90 hip transitions where you move from one side to the other, okay? The big thing I like to focus on is when you're in this position here, you want to try and actually actively pull this knee off the floor while keeping this leg still until it has to follow through. So actively focus on one hip essentially here, and just don't go through the motions with it. Okay, so again, another great hip mobility exercise that if you want to throw into your warm-ups if you haven't been doing them, okay? And the last one we'll talk about is that thoracic spine mobility, okay? Nice way to obviously get into a position where you're going to isolate your thoracic spine is by locking up again your lower back, which is meant to be a nice stable joint. So your lumbar region, just bring your legs across your body with your hips at 90 degrees, knees together, focusing on trying to get the back, your upper back on the floor. Okay, obviously the more you do that, hopefully the more range you'll hold into that, and obviously even by identifying how little or how much range you have there will be a good starting point as well. So get 3 exercises straight away that you can put into your warm-up or under a prehab type phase of your session that's going to, I suppose, reduce the risk of some common injuries. In terms of improving tissue tolerance and the quality of your tissue, I suppose one of the big things out there now in the sporting world is the use of isometrics, all right? And again, isometrics can be very, you know, if we put it on a spectrum, we can have general and we can have specific, all right? And again, we'll talk a wee bit about specific isometrics when we get to the speed section. For now, essentially what it is you're going to, if I was to use this guy on the floor doing this bridge as an example, quite commonly, you know, in a bridge exercise, that movement would require you to raise your hips right off the floor and it would recruit the glutes. But what this man is doing here is essentially taking his heels into that seat, pulling his heels back towards himself and just slightly lifting his hips into, I suppose, that posterior tilt position. What that does is puts tension through your hamstrings. And it's developing, I suppose, again, opposite to what usually happens in sport, where you have this concentric or shortening of the muscle and your eccentric, which is the lengthening part. Okay, so it's getting a bit of the both of that there, and it's locking that in, okay. And again, it's quite common if you've had a hamstring injury, for example, that this would be prescribed. And again, there's loads of isometrics out there for each body part and for specific injury sites. And obviously, that would be specific to your sport then again, or your previous injuries, where you want to go with your isometrics. Okay, so again, for team sport players, we would often focus again on hamstrings. We would do some isometrics on your hip flexors. We would do some isometrics maybe on your adductors or your groins. And another common site is your calf muscles, okay? So both your calf muscles. Again, all those are good muscles to develop in your off season with the use of isometrics. And again, it doesn't be a full session. You can see I've just given you the protocol in terms of where you can start off by just doing 30 seconds on each 2 times, and your warm-up will be, I suppose, introductory or a starting point for you as an athlete to improving your tissue quality. When we talk about tissue tolerance, what I talked about earlier is how everybody here is very general. I do know there's a lot of, I suppose, GA, soccer, basketball, rugby guys and girls here. So I thought it was important to highlight probably one of the most common prehab exercises that people do and have been doing. Okay, and again, the reason they're doing it is because the stats don't lie in with it. There's a massive increase in the reduction of injuries in hamstrings across all sports by the use of Nordic hamstring curls. Okay. So again, I've just pulled this infographic up rather than me talk through the full protocol. But if it's not something you're doing at the minute in your off season, it's something I would definitely engage in and something that maybe you would introduce now in the off season. It's more of an eccentric type exercise, so it's the other end, I suppose, from the isometric where you're lengthening the muscle. It can bring about a bit of soreness and a bit of stiffness, so the off season is a great time to do that. Like other qualities, when you get in season, it's not an exercise you're going to want to just start doing or throw in there. So now again, the off season, by having a nice bit of volume of your Nordics in there, and again, starting with as little as maybe 5 repetitions, you can build that right up to 20 repetitions. And once you get in season, then you have that dose there. You can reduce your volume again. The other common exercise out there that's well known and people have been using across all team field sports is the Copenhagen. Both these exercises have come through a massive amount of research. People try to prove it right or wrong, and they're both coming out on the positive side in terms of reducing the risk of injuries. So again, for me, it's a no-brainer for team sport athletes. All my team sport athletes will be doing them in the off season. When something's so heavily backed by research, and I suppose off my own experience, anecdotally, I have seen a massive reduction in injuries because of it as well. Okay, so again, 2 very specific exercises, again, based on your sport. If you're in a high-speed running sport, if you're in a sport that revolves change of direction, definitely 2 exercises if you haven't been doing them, and maybe get them involved in your programming. So moving on to strength. No matter where an athlete is on their athletic development journey, motor skill competency should be a key part of the process. So again, I didn't want to come on here and talk again about some of the very general strength training that people talk about in terms of maybe sets and reps for maximum strength or general strength or strength and endurance or hypertrophy. I want to kind of, I suppose, strip it back a layer and kind of, I suppose, talk about, again, what you should be actually strengthening when you're in the gym. So again, it's not going to be specific exercises. We're going to talk movements rather than muscles, all right? So again, this year, again, we'll develop into, all sports. This year is not just team sport players. This is all sports. Those athletic motor skills, if you have a quick scan around them, how many of those are you actually training in a given training week or a given training cycle, okay? To the sake of tonight's presentation, I'm just going to touch on stuff that probably is primarily focused on in the gym environment. That tends to be our single leg strength. Okay, and when I talk about single leg strength, I'm talking here about both a squat pattern and a hinge pattern. Okay, I'm not going to interchange between the two of them. We're just talking about both. If we're looking at one leg, we obviously want to be strong on two legs. Again, there's a certain requirement for your sport in that also. When it comes to upper body, there's two major movements that you want to obviously address, and that's an upper body push and upper body pull. Both those movements, again, will have variations and how you train them, and how you do that is what the direction you train those movements. So if it's a vertical push, it might look like a shoulder press. Horizontal push is more like your push-up. And then if we look at our pulling movements, a pull-up exercise is more of your vertical pulling, and a rowing type exercise is more of your horizontal pulling. Okay, now again, those are the qualities in terms of your two lower bodies, single leg and double leg, and an upper push pull. The last section is going to be your bracing capabilities or your core, and that ties into some of your anti-rotation capabilities. Again, another method of training your core. What I've done in terms of trying to give a practical example here, this is just a simple program that was given to an under 16 development squad a couple of seasons ago, and it's really just to kind of reinforce the simplicity of using this as a program guide. And again, for no matter what sports, and again, it is off season, so we don't have to worry about specifics. Okay, we can train in a very general sense here. So again, in a general sense, how do I improve my lower body strength? How do I improve my upper body strength? And how am I going to improve my core? So again, if we break down that first day, you can see quite easily you have a lower body which focuses on two legs. There's a core movement. There's a single leg exercise. There's an upper body pull, and there's an upper body push. Okay. The second day, again, all we've done here is we've gone with slightly different variation of the exercises. We've gone with a single leg here with our squat pattern, with an anti-rotation core exercise, a double leg, again, focus more on the hinge rather than a squat. We've got an upper body pull, and we're pushing more upwards than we are outwards, okay? So again, there's I suppose, a take-home program straight away that would target your athletic or your motor skills that we talked about previously, across 2 different days, where you can target all those movements very, very easily at home. You can see there's not a lot of equipment required. And I'll talk briefly on, if you have equipment, how you might load those exercises, and if you don't have equipment, how you might load them, okay, in terms of if it's a body weight exercise. So again, if it's a loaded exercise, quite simply, keep it quite general. Okay, you can do this weekly or bi-weekly. Pick a weight, start with it, and you're going to go 3x8, which will give you total 24 reps. The following week, if you can increase the weight, just do 1 extra set but 2 less reps. So again, you're still doing in total 24 reps. So the volume is staying the same, but the intensity is increasing. The following week, we can go with, again, slightly heavier weight, slight increase in terms of volume just because it's 5x5. And the final week then is flipped on its head. That's your most intensive week, 6x4. Again, you can see here in this example I've given, that's an 8-week example. Okay, so straight away you have a session there that you can actually plan straightforward enough for a full 8-week block there in terms of your goblet squat. You're going to, for the first 2 weeks, keep it at 3x8, and then incrementally add weight or increase intensity. If we were looking below, again, any of those loaded exercises, that would apply directly to that also. When we go to a body weight exercise, because the intensity is your body, and if you don't plan on adding any external load to that to increase the intensity, essentially what we do there is add more volume to it. So rather than add intensity, we add volume. So what that might look like is add 2 reps, make 3 to 4, and then we can go back to 8 reps, but we add on an extra set. So straight away, my volume is increasing week to week here, okay? Again, it's just a fairly straight example. And again, apologies if it's very simplistic for some of the athletes on here. But again, it is, I suppose, it is to try and educate everybody around this, I suppose, the fundamentals of the movement patterns, number one. It doesn't have to be fancy exercises. And then how easy it is to progress those exercises week to week or bi-weekly, cycle to cycle. The next quality we're going to touch on after strength is our speed. Okay, so there are many elements to enhancing speed, and unfortunately, there's no one training method that I'm going to tell you tonight that's going to make you faster. Okay, it's a real rabbit hole if you want to go down it. So I'm going to touch on a couple of, I suppose, very basic stuff again that you can apply even at home, and maybe give you a session or a glimpse of what you could be doing out, whether it be on the field or on a flat surface, then in terms of to increase your acceleration and your top end speed. As discussed previously, developing specific strength qualities. So like we talked about, our Nordics, our isometric drills, we can make those strength qualities quite specific to obviously where we need to be strong. So our calves, our hip flexors, our hamstrings, and so on. When it comes to speed, if we're strong in all those muscles, okay, that's going to have a very positive effect in terms of your speed and your force outputs. Okay, again, if you can generate more power or more force under the ground, the more reaction you'll get out of it. Obviously, the more speed you'll develop as it goes. Speed, and when I say speed tonight, I'm really talking about linear speed. We tend to break it into 3 phases, okay, and that's going to be your acceleration. Okay, so that's anywhere probably between 0 meters and 30 meters. There's a phase after that where you're going to transition into your absolute or your top maximum speed. Okay, again, I'll touch a wee bit more tonight on the acceleration side. Again, I'll touch a wee bit on the maximum speed side. We're not going to talk too much about that transition because it's just not in the scope of the presentation, unfortunately. Again, the reason I'm touching on the acceleration, as I've highlighted in many positions in various field sports, the acceleration phase off speed is regarded as a physical quality which has the greatest impact on performance. Okay, so again, when we look back at evidence, we look back at research around most team field sports, there's a lot of accelerations, and there has been a high correlation to successful outcomes based on the amount of accelerations a player or a team obviously exhibits. One exercise, and again, this will tie into some of your isometric work we talked about earlier for your calf, but it'll also carry over into your speed work as well. And it's really about getting a feel or getting a feel for certain positions, where the weight maybe should be in your foot, how high do I need to lift my knee, where my ankle should be, and so on. Okay, so what it essentially looks like for a wall drill is you're going to, as the name suggests, need a wall. You're going to hands at shoulder height, and you're going to imagine hold the wall up. So what that does is you're creating tension through your upper body straight away. Okay, I like to use a cue there where you have a straight line from your head to your heel, so from head to heel like steel, and we're going to lift your back heel slightly off the floor. Okay, so this will recruit your calf muscles, and that will generate a bit more force through the front of the foot. And again, that's quite specific to obviously your acceleration, where you're pushing through the ball of the foot. All right, imagine you could slide a card underneath your heel, so it's only having to be slightly off the floor, and you're going to hold that position, as I said, for 10-15 seconds, a couple of sets each side. And again, what you're trying to do here is mimic the angles and the positions you would get into while you're accelerating. Probably a wee bit more upright than you actually would be, but it's still giving a good sense of, again, that feel in terms of where the weight should be in your foot and so on. Once you've developed, I suppose, those positions and you're comfortable, and again, if there's any athletes here, they'll be quite versed in a lot of these speed and mechanic type drills. Okay, you can move it on, you can progress it on to more of your marching and your skipping and your A-run type drills. And then there's a drill called prime times, which is essentially like straight leg bounds for distance. Again, this is again focusing on that linear speed development. This is just an example again of a sample session that you could focus on. That's going to obviously target acceleration, and your last bit of reps is going to be focused on your max speed. Okay, and again, I'll go back and talk about max speed and why most people train it. Again, is it's a quality that if we don't train it, we start losing our speed. So it is important to, once a week, twice every 2 weeks if we can, with that 5-day period in mind, if we can train our max speed. The big thing about this off season, and I've heard the Limerick hurling S&C coach talk about this recently, and it's something probably people, it's probably alien to a lot of team sport players in terms of recovery. when we're training for speed. So you can see here straight away I've highlighted, and that's just approximate number. You want to take 60 seconds rest for every 10 meters sprinted. Okay, doesn't have to be complete rest as a passive rest. You can throw in your extra mobility. So again, you can work through your 90-90s, you can work through your knee to wall, you can work through some T-spine mobility, whatever range you want to work through. But you should be recovering enough that you can actually give a high effort for your max speed drills or your acceleration drills. A lot of the time as coaches in particular, our hands are tied where we have to push our speed training into the last 5 or 10 minutes of a warm-up. Okay, now's the time where you as an athlete and maybe you as a coach can actually chase a quality and adapt it correctly in terms of allowing enough recovery between repetitions to adapt to the stimulus that you're given, i.e. that speed effort. Okay, so again, it's just something that people have been neglecting probably when they do their sprints, is they think they need to be, out of breath, or they really need to be going after every session as if it's a conditioning session. Speed is for speed, so make sure all your reps are nice high quality. Continuing on, we'll touch a wee bit on this continuum of plyometrics, and essentially what plyometrics is the fancy word for jumping and hopping. Okay, where plyometrics come into the equation for me, I think it's a way to develop power, because there's no way really. Yes, there's a way to train plyometrics extensively, but there's not something you can do slowly. Okay, so if I tell somebody to jump, they have to exert force into the ground. There's no way of jumping slowly. Okay, so again, when it comes to training our power around this time of the year, your plyometrics will take care of a lot of your power qualities as well. Okay. The way this model has been written by this Australian coach, Lachlan Wilmot, again, is probably written across a season again in terms of your off-season, pre-season competitive phase. Okay, so for the sake of us being in an off-season mode, I would probably stay on the left-hand side of that continuum. Okay, I would focus on my landings. Okay, so here they call them tall to short landings, but that's otherwise known as a drop squat or a snap down type exercise. Focus on some landings where you're stepping off small heights. And again, really focus on the quality of your landing. All right. Again, if we go back and talk about that speed quality we're talking about, you need brakes. Okay, there's no point having a Ferrari engine and having no brakes. Okay, so you need to learn how to land. Obviously, that'll harness all that power and all that speed that you're developing, and it'll be obviously a massive factor then in terms of your agility components and your change of direction components. Being able to change direction would require you to decelerate or absorb force eccentrically. So if you're not doing plyometrics at the minute, a great starting point is learn how to land. Okay. Once you've developed that, then you can focus on some of the easier jumps, the likes of your counter movement jumps, your jumps from a position where you're seated. Again, we are just focusing on that upward phase. Okay, and again, it's taking a bit of the landing out of it for you, or it's taking a bit of that stretch shortening cycle out of it for you, so it's not as intense. As that continues on, they essentially become more intensive. Okay, so when you start doing continuous jumps, so if I ask somebody to jump for height for 10 continuous reps, obviously again that's going to elicit that power, but again it's quite intensive in terms of all the cardiorespiratory effect it would have, and then obviously when we talk about the tissue quality that you need to train your jumping muscles essentially around that as well. Around this time of the year, I like to focus, I suppose, when you're at a stage where you can jump continuously, comfortably, and you're competent at it, I would use more extensive methods. Okay, so all that means is rather than jump for as high as you can, you're going to jump with a technique in mind. Okay, so basically I'd be telling people to jump at 70% effort here. And again, there's massive, I suppose, benefits in terms of you're still going to be training that power quality. You're still going to be making the limbs in question, whether it be an upper body plyometric or a lower body plyometric, you're still going to make those muscle and joints resilient and robust. And as I said, doing continuous jumping type training has known to have an aerobic effect. Okay, and if you're doing that with a 70% effort, it tends to be more of that aerobic training effect. Okay, you're not actually breathing quite fast and hard. It's just a slow deep breath. So again, it's working that cardiac output quality, where it's the lower end of your aerobic training, okay? So again, with your plyometrics, number one thing is you should be doing them, okay? And again, I can't say exactly where a starting point is and your end point is for you as an athlete, but if you haven't been doing them, definitely start with your landings, develop it towards that continuous type jumps. And once you're there, then, as I said, you can train it with more extensive means in mind, okay? Because again, if we try and peak too early, i.e. we try and PB how far we can jump or how high we can jump, we're almost wasting energy at this time of the year. It's not going to have a performance enhancement, if you want to call it that, by being able to jump high now in your off season. You want to obviously harness all that in terms of bringing it into your pre-season and obviously into your competitive season going forward. Lastly, we're just going to again touch on conditioning, and again, conditioning is very, very specific. There's no means that I'm going to tell you here that this is what you should all be doing, because across sports, across different positions, again, if somebody's only starting training, if somebody's 4 or 5 weeks into their off season, if somebody's 12 weeks into an off season, your conditioning is going to be quite specific to where you are, okay? Your training age is another one. So again, if there's minors or even younger athletes here, obviously the type of conditioning you do is not going to be the same. You just aren't many adults, so your conditioning isn't going to be the exact same to that of a senior level athlete, okay? But if we wanted to break it down and wanted to mix and match different methods of conditioning that you could be doing now in your off season, and I've kept the terms a bit generic rather than specific, we're going to talk about continuous type methods of aerobic training. There's interval type methods, and then you have that high intensity interval training. So again, it's slightly higher intensity than your interval training. And again, these are probably the ones that I've been prescribing lately in terms of most of my team sport athletes, where they're getting a mixture of that across the week. And again, it goes back to why are we training these qualities? It's to maintain those training residuals and those training qualities, okay? So again, if I'm only doing one continuous type of conditioning session a week, knowing that I can maintain my aerobic capacity or my aerobic fitness for up to 30 days, I'm definitely getting enough to keep me ticking over to get towards my pre-season. So let's break it down and give a couple of examples of what that might look like in terms of those 3 qualities. Again, by no means are these sessions that I would advise anybody to go do. It's just an example of what it might look like, okay? And again, it is the off season, so these don't have to be specific to your sport. If you're a runner or if you're a team field sport player, you don't actually need to be on feet for 3 of these sessions, okay? Mix and match your modes. You can do a rower, you can have a ski erg, you can have a cross trainer, you can cycle, whatever means. Essentially what you're looking for again is an adaptation maybe more to your aerobic or your cardiorespiratory system, which is your heart and lungs, okay? So how much you pound the pitches or how much you pound the road at this time of the year is not going to be, the major focus point. The focus point is going to be developing a massive aerobic base, i.e. making your heart bigger, faster, stronger, and so on. All right, so for the example I've given for that continuous, obviously, if you're going to be going for a long duration, the intensity is going to be a bit lower, okay? So it's going to be that low to moderate intensity. Your aerobic session might last anywhere between 20 to 80 minutes, again, depending on your fitness level. And again, what you're looking for there, if you're trying to gauge it in terms of intensity, it's really between 60 to 80% of your max heart rate, okay? You can keep in that range, you're obviously having a nice cardiorespiratory effect there, okay? So again, the sample I've given is just a continuous 30 minutes within that, I suppose, that heart rate range, okay? Again, that could be a run, cycle, it could be a swim, whatever you're competent at that you can get that 30-minute done on. Your intervals are going to be, I suppose, a more moderate intensity, but again, it's not off the scale yet. It's not at that real high intensity phase yet, okay? So your interval training tends to be anywhere between 3 to 5 minute bouts, okay? And again, start very general. If your sport requires you to do 3-minute bouts, why don't you do 5 minutes now in terms of making it more general and getting that overload and that progression in there now in your off season, okay? Again, because it's interval, there's going to be a rest period there, okay? So usually what you do with a very simple way of writing intervals is rest the same duration as you work. Okay, so if I'm working, an example I've given, for 4 minutes, I'm going to rest for 4 minutes. I'm going to repeat that 4 times. Okay, that's a quite common, I suppose, aerobic running drill would be used in the off season in soccer, because it's easy to measure in terms of you're just on the clock. Okay, you're not given specific distance, you're just told to run, and obviously you're given the range of maybe where you want to get your heart rate into. Again, depending on how hard you run, it'll be within that range, that's 70 to 90%. That last phase, and again, we know we still need to train, I suppose, a bit of power and a bit of speed. So where you train, that might be once a week with that exposure to that high intensity interval type training. Okay, so it might be more of a sprint type session, or it might more be basically a session where you're going to have high intensity and your effort is going to be closer to that max heart rate. Okay, so it's going to be 90% plus of your max heart rate. The duration of your rest can be anywhere between 1 times your work, or even half the time. Okay, so some people might work for 30 seconds, rest for 15 seconds. Some people might work for 30, rest for 30. It's probably the most common one out there, where you see that high intensity interval where people work fast and hard for 30, actively recover or rest for 30, and then repeat. The example I've given is probably more for the field sport athletes, where you're going on a hard run for 15 seconds, recovering the same duration, and then repeating for 8 reps and doing your 3 sets with a bit of rest in between your sets, obviously. So those are, again, you should probably be still getting a sprinkle of each one of those qualities in your off season. A lot of programs I've seen and athletes coming to me is heavily based around, this HIIT kind of model, where people are training at a very high intensity nearly every session. Again, in terms of performance enhancement, we're so far out from probably competitive action. Again, I feel anecdotally that you're probably going to get more benefit at the minute at this time of our off season, through probably your aerobic and your interval type training in terms of conditioning. As I said, with maybe 1 or 2 exposures of your HIIT and your speed type training thrown in there, but the rest, keep it nice and general, and keep it as far away from your sport as possible, because when you get to your sport, you're going to have loads of specificity. Your trainer is going to have you, probably because it's going to be a condensed pre-season, you're going to go straight into your sport. There's probably not going to be your typical pre-season where you can afford to do 1 or 2 weeks to get fit. You're going to want to be fit to train, because there's not going to be time to train to get fit. Okay, so again, by being fit, what I mean is having a good aerobic base, being resilient, being robust, and get through your pre-season unscathed. Go in strong, athletic, look after all your athletic qualities, less likely to pick up an injury, more likely to go into your pre-season healthy, get through your pre-season and right into your in-season, where your team and you as an individual will hopefully be successful. So sorry if I went over time. I haven't even looked at my clock. Obviously, if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. If there's any other questions that's maybe beyond the scope of this, feel free to reach out and get me on Twitter, or you can also get me on Instagram. You can just send me an ad there and I'll get you through. You can see from my Instagram, I've tended to post a bit of stuff there in terms of maybe your conditioning, and maybe what you can do in the weights room and so on as well. So some more information over there for anybody who wants to catch up with it there. And thanks again for taking the time on a Thursday evening and tuning in and listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. That's a very comprehensive report there, and we appreciate all the effort that you had in presenting that, so thank you. I'm going to hand over to Nolik now from MindFit. Nolik has a lot of experience in sports psychology and has international experience, having studied in Finland and Greece. So Nolik, it's over to you now.
Perfect, thanks Maggie. So yeah, I'm going to take you all straight into my presentation now. Okay, so hopefully you can all see that okay. Perfect. So I'm presenting today on the psychology of success in sport. So success is dependent on your mindset, how well you prepare, the intensity of your training, how well you respond to adversity, and other things like your ability to focus and under pressure, all of which will contribute to optimal performance. So mental training can contribute to your technical, tactical, and mental ability, and your level of success both on and off the field of play. So mental toughness, this is all about having the psychological edge that helps you cope better with demands like competition, training, lifestyle, and also staying in control under stress. So there are 4 important traits of mental toughness, what we call the 4 C's. And having these 4 qualities is the key to success in sport. So first is control. So if you're high on control, you're better able to control your emotions and also keep your emotions in check. Challenge. So if you're high on challenge, this means that you can see change and adversity as opportunities rather than threats. Third, we have confidence. So this is your self-belief. If you're high on confidence, you will take setbacks in your stride. And fourth is commitment. So being high on commitment means that you can establish routines, you can set and reach goals very consistently without being distracted, all of which is helping you to be successful in sport. So today's 3 techniques that we're looking at that can positively impact your mental toughness and your level of success in sport are: first up is self-talk, your inner chatter. Goal setting, your priorities and your expectations. And visualization, your sensory experiences. So we're starting with self-talk. So everyone has an inner voice that can be either helpful or harmful. And it is really important to learn to restructure your thoughts whenever a negative one creeps in. So let's have a look at the process of self-talk here. So first you have an external event that happens. Then we interpret this, which leads to our feelings and our reactions. So if as an athlete you can replace negative thoughts with positive ones, this will lead to high level performance. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples now of how we can transform our self-talk. So instead of saying or thinking something like, I'm going to fail, instead try saying or thinking, I'm going to give it my best. You can replace a thought like, nothing positive will come from this, with, I will unlock the potential of this. So 3 ways to talk yourself up and change the direction of your self-talk. Let's have a look. So first, number 1, listen to what you're saying to yourself. Notice what your inner voice is saying. Is your self-talk mostly positive or is it mostly negative? Each day, make notes on what you're thinking. Number 2 is challenge your self-talk. Is there any actual evidence for what I'm thinking? What would I say if a friend were in a similar situation? And can I do anything to change what I'm feeling bad about? And then number 3, change your self-talk. Make a list of the positive things about yourself. And instead of saying something like, I'll never be able to do this, try, is there anything I can do that will help me do this? So overall, positive self-talk, it helps athletes to overcome their negative thinking, to be more relaxed and to be more focused. So moving on now to goal setting. Goals are short-term or long-term targets set down by an athlete that outlines their expectations of their overall performance. And there are different types of goals. So we have process goals. So they will focus on how an athlete performs a specific skill. So for example, a volleyball player perfecting a serve toss, or a rugby kicker focusing on foot placement in relation to the ball. Then we have performance goals. So these are the performance levels that you need to be able to achieve if you're to reach the outcome. So things like physical, tactical, psychological, and lifestyle factors. And the third group is your outcome goals. So this is the result or the end goal that you're working towards. So for example, it would be something like winning a league championship or beating an opponent on points, and maybe even achieving a personal best. So there is a science to setting goals, what we call SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So starting with specific, as an athlete, think about what exactly you want to achieve. Clearly define your target. Measurable. So if you measure your progress, you're going to be able to stay on track and reach those target dates that you have within your goal. Achievable. So your goal should always be reasonable, but you have to make it challenging at the same time. Realistic. So if you make your goals too difficult, you're kind of setting the stage for failure like that. But at the same time, if you set them too low, it kind of sends the message that you're not capable of doing this. So always make sure you set the bar high enough for a satisfying result. And lastly, we have timely. So putting an end point on your goal will give you a clear target. Without this kind of time limit or time frame, it tends not to happen because you feel that you can start at any time. So goal setting is a great booster for an athlete's motivation, for confidence, and overall athletic performance. And then we have visualization, or mental imagery as it's also known. So visualization is a cognitive tool. It accesses the imagination. It can include mental sensory experience, so your sound, sight, smell, taste, and touch. And visualization actually will stimulate the same brain regions as when you physically perform that same action. Visualization can help overcome nerves, boost confidence, improve focus, and heighten performance. So what happens is the athlete will imagine themselves in a specific environment, and they're thinking and imagining performing an activity of their sport using all of their senses and using their emotion. You can use visualization for a lot of different skills. For example, replaying past successful performances that you might have had, also to imagine future performances. It's great for helping you prepare on how to respond and kind of bounce back from mistakes. And it's great as well for technical and tactical execution. So really, visualization is all about purposely rehearsing in your mind's eye to program your body for success. So to maximize athletic potential. It's really important to have belief in yourself. You want confidence to always come from within. So you can ask yourself certain key questions to help boost your confidence. So for example, what are your strengths? What have you accomplished? Think about your work ethic. What can you say about your mental toughness, and so on. And then you can use the answers of those questions to kind of fuel your confidence, fuel your self-belief, just the same way as you might fuel your body before a game or before a competition. So mental training, think your way to success. So really, in conclusion, positive self-talk, goal setting and visualization, they're really crucial ingredients for an athlete's success. And we know from research that mental training combined with physical training can improve performance much more than physical training alone. So athletes will get the greatest results by having mental training as a long-term, typical part of their training routine. So guys, that's the end of the presentation part. So I'm going to stop sharing at this point and bring you back to the main screen.
Thank you very much, Nolik. As a super presentation, thank you. Some useful tools there in order to help us to prepare for our sports. So thank you. Next of all, I'm going to.
Maggie, I had a couple of other things lined up.
Sorry.
But are we kind of short on time?
No, we're good.
Are you sure? Okay. Grant. So I'm actually gonna share my screen again. And hopefully everyone will see this clearly enough. So all I need you to do for this part is follow the instructions on the screen. So go to menti.com on your phones and put in that code that you can see at the top. So basically what we're going to be doing here is a kind of a quick athlete survey. So the first question, why is mental fitness important in your sport? So when you put in your answers for this, they will come up anonymously. You won't see any names on the screen. And I think you'll be able to put in a total of 2 answers. So hopefully everybody's been able to log in okay. Okay, we have quite a lot of answers coming in thick and fast there, so I won't read through all of them, but I think quite an important question, so you can kind of see each other's perspectives as well on this question. So I'll just give you another minute on that one and we'll move to the next one. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next one. So this is I think the screen might be a bit stuck. 1 second. I think I'm just going to bring you all back because the screen is stuck there for that second question. But so the second question basically was, what mental skills would you like to improve in your sport? So if you have any answers for this, you can put them in the chat as we go along. What are the mental skills you would really like to work on? And Maggie, are we okay for time? Just checking in on that.
Yeah, you have about 4 minutes left there or so.
4 minutes, okay. We're going to do one last exercise. I'm actually going to be sending you to the breakout rooms for this. So I'm going to give you the instructions now. So I'm going to break you up into about 10 groups or so, and we're going to be working on self-talk, okay? So within your group, I want you to take turns talking about times where you might have made mistakes in your sport and the kind of common negative self-talk that you would have. And then the other group members are going to kind of transform these negative statements into something more constructive, more uplifting and more positive, okay? Does that make sense for everyone? All right, so I am going to set up the breakout rooms now if I can. And also just a note for the hosts, you will probably be added in automatically. But you know, you can stay and participate if you want, or if not, you can come back here to the main screen, okay? So you should have a notification there at the bottom to join your breakout room. Okay, so that was quite a quick discussion, I'm sure. But just a couple of last tips on the mental skills. For self-talk, it can be quite helpful if you can use a cue in your sport. So, for example, a lot of my athletes, when they notice they've had a negative thought, they will click their fingers or slap their thigh. So this is kind of like a signal for action for them to manage their thoughts. Some other athletes of mine, they will picture a pin in a red balloon, which is quite an effective image as well, helping them to manage their thoughts. As for visualization, it's very helpful when you're doing visualization if you can write your visualization goals down first. And this kind of just gives you a bit of a structure and a plan. And make sure you relax before you do that. Take some deep breaths before you start your visualization, and just make it as vivid, using all of your senses and your emotion, making it as vivid as possible. Yeah, so overall, I think we've covered the three main skills. Hopefully you took something from that and you can add it into your athletic training routine. So thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Nolik, for sharing that with us. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over now to Ronan Doherty. Ronan is sports nutritionist and lecturer at LYIT. So Ronan, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Maggie. Okay, so obviously we'll just get started. Thanks for the introduction, Maggie. I'm Ronan Doherty. I'm a lecturer in LIT, and I also work as a performance nutritionist at the Sport Ireland Institute. So a bit like Paul, I'm aware that there's a wide demographic in terms of athletes and other people in the audience. And so I've tried to keep it as general as possible so that it applies to the most people. But if anyone has anything specific at the end, I can answer questions either at the end of the presentation or at the end of the session. So just in terms of athletes first, obviously there are loads of different goals and things that athletes will have. So in terms of the things that influence performance, nutrition is a key performance influencer, and it's the one aspect that athletes have within their control. Then your training and conditioning obviously has a massive impact on performance. So that's not just training per se, mental skills and things like that come in under training and conditioning as well. And then the third thing that influences performance is genetics. So we all have a genetic predisposition in the way that we react to training. So some people can get fit relatively quickly. Some people might have to train harder for longer to achieve the same levels or adaptations. Some people can get leaner quite quickly. Some people may take longer. So there are genetic things around how we adapt and respond to training. Then in terms of athletes, there's lots of different goals that are important. Obviously, it depends on athlete type and the sport that you're involved in. But repeated sprint ability is really important for most sports. Aerobic capacity obviously is really important. Speed, agility, flexibility, power, strength, reaction time, skill and technique. And then within that, and the one that's most related to nutrition, body composition is vitally important for sports. So some athletes may want to get leaner, some athletes may want to increase muscle mass. So there are lots of different goals around that obviously nutrition impacts in terms of body composition. So in terms of the common issues that I see a lot with athletes, poor skills is the first thing. So I see a lot of particularly younger athletes, maybe teenagers who are moving from secondary school to university, who either can't cook or can only cook 1 or 2 meals. They also may not be aware of all the different food groups or have the knowledge of what goes with what in terms of meals. I see a lot of people making poor choices when shopping or dining out. So again, I'm not aware what they need to buy, what ingredients they need for meals, or they make poor decisions when eating out. You see poor or outdated knowledge of sports nutrition. So some people are getting information from the wrong places. So maybe relying on Instagram for nutrition information, or maybe looking at outdated information, or taking information from other people who are ill-informed. Obviously, most people, bar at the minute during lockdown, are very busy, so that impacts how and when we can eat. We see a lot poor availability of good food and drink choices at events. So sometimes at competitions, good food options aren't always available, or athletes may not have the time to eat properly. So you need to plan around that. And then the big one for athletes at all levels of the spectrum are indiscriminate use of supplements. So there seems to be a misconception out there that supplements will make up for a bad diet, and that's definitely not the case. We'll look at it in more detail as we go through the presentation, but supplements really are only an add-on when someone's diet is completely optimized, okay? So in terms of nutrition and performance, a good diet lets you train harder for longer. If you train harder for longer, you get greater overload on the body. So that greater overload, or that extra work that you can do, results in enhanced adaptations, and ultimately those enhanced adaptations result in a fitter and better athlete. Okay, so nutrition is key in terms of fuel and performance, then in terms of recovery and letting someone recover from the training that they've done, and as a result improving their performance. So what we're going to look at are the 3 key principles of sports nutrition. So firstly, you have to stay hydrated. So we'll look at hydration as we move through the presentation. First, we'll look at fueling. So it's really important that you provide fuel for your muscles, and that really depends on the duration and type of activity. So we'll look at that in more detail in a minute. And then the third thing that's really key is recovery. So kind of similar to what Paul looked at, it's really important that we understand that we have to do different things at different phases of the season. So the days of just doing the same thing over the course of the season, from pre-season to competition phases and in the off season, are gone. So firstly, in that general prep phase, in terms of nutrition, we're looking to support training loads. So you're either coming off an off season where you've either taken a break or maybe played a different sport for a few months. So there's going to be a change in training loads. You need to change the way you're eating to support that increased training load. There may be composition goals. So again, people may be looking to get leaner or to increase muscle mass. So again, the way you eat has to be manipulated to help you achieve those goals. And you'll be looking at improving or introducing recovery protocols that you can then use over the course of the season. As you move into the specific prep phase, the focus changes slightly. So again, you need to focus on fueling and eating to support high intensity training, and still implement and augment those recovery strategies that you've developed in the general prep phase. Then in the taper or competition phase, obviously there's a slight reduction in the volume of training. Obviously the intensity will still be high. So again, the way an athlete's eating needs to be looked at and manipulated in terms of that reduction in training volume to avoid maybe excessive body fat gains. So like I said, or like it says there, avoiding mass gain during the taper. So then in the transition or rest phase, so some people are in that phase now as a result of lockdowns, so we're not able to do the normal activities that we would do, or some people are still training. So obviously you know yourself what phase you're in, but in that transition or rest phase, you should switch to following the guidelines based on activity levels. So if you've reduced your activity slightly and you're taking a break, you may switch towards eating more like guidelines for the normal population or general public. Or if you're switching sport, then you may change the way you're eating based on how intense the training is for that sport, or how often you're training and competing. So just to get an understanding of fuel use at different exercise intensities, there are 2 main fuel sources that the body uses. So at lower intensities, so if we want to think of intensity as a percentage of our max or VO2 max, at up to about 50% of our max, we're predominantly using fat for energy. So everyone sitting here at the minute watching the presentation, we're using fat for energy. If you go for a walk or do anything that's low intensity, we'll predominantly be using fat for energy. At about 50%, there's a switch to predominantly using, or a crossover to predominantly using carbohydrate for fuel. So at high intensity, our main fuel source is carbohydrate stored in our muscles and liver, and obviously we have some carbohydrates circulating in our blood as glucose as well. So at really high intensities, we need carbohydrates. So anyone that tells you athletes don't need carbohydrate, that's wrong. Okay, what we do have to look at is how long we're training for how intense it is, how long we're competing for, and manipulate the amount of carbohydrate we're eating based on that, okay? So just to look at fueling in a bit more detail, obviously I've just said glucose circulates in the bloodstream. We also have glycogen stored in the muscles and liver. Unfortunately, those stores are limited. So this example is for a 70 kilogram meal. So when you're fully loaded with carbohydrate, you've got about 40 calories of glucose circulating in the bloodstream for rapid use. And depending on muscle mass, we've got somewhere between 1900 and say about 2,500 calories of carbohydrate stored as glycogen in the muscles and liver. So just looking at fueling quickly, some examples based on the amount of time you might have. So if you have 3 to 4 hours before a training session, so this is examples for pre-event meals or pre-training meals, so those larger dinner type meals. Things like rice and pasta with a tomato-based sauce, vegetables, and a lean source of protein is perfect. A large omelette with spinach, ham, cheese, and brown toast is perfect again. Or if it's earlier in the day, something like overnight oats for breakfast would be perfect. So overnight oats with banana and peanut butter. When you have less time and you want to top up, so 1 to 2 hours, a piece of fruit and some yogurt is perfect, or some cereal with milk or something like that. So just to move that on or show it more practically, we've got 4 athlete plates here. So the first 2 are for meat eaters. So we've got an easy training day or weight management plate. And then we'll look at a moderate or training day plate on the next slide. And then I've got some vegan options as well. So this is just trying to visualize what meals should look like or what your plate should look like based on the amount of activity you're doing. So we're thinking about periodizing our carbohydrate or tailoring our carbohydrate intake to the work that we're doing or fueling for the work that we're doing. So about half of the plate or half of the meal should be fruit or vegetables. Okay, if we look at the top left, there are carbohydrates or obvious or whole grain type carbohydrates. So pasta, rice, potatoes, cereals, breads, legumes should be a quarter of the plate on an easy training day. If the athlete's trying to get leaner or it's a very, very easy day or a rest day, then just under a quarter of the plate should be that type of carbohydrate. In terms of protein, again, it's about a quarter of the plate. So or meat, poultry, beef, lamb, fish, eggs, dairy is about a quarter of the meal. Then on the outside, we've just got different options for flavor. So salts, herbs, spices, vinegar, salsa, mustard, ketchup. Oil options, so focusing on healthy fats, so oils, avocado, nuts, seeds, cheese, butter, and then drink options on the top right, so water, dairy, non-dairy options, squash, and flavored beverages to try and promote hydration and fluid intake. So that's for an easy training day. Then you can see this is slightly changed for a moderate training day. So we've increased the amount of carbohydrate because we're completing more activity. We need to replenish those glycogen stores. So you can see on a moderate training day, about a third of the plate is carbohydrate. Okay, and then just to highlight that for vegetarians, it's a similar setup. So again, half the plate is vegetables and fruit. Carbohydrate is just roughly a quarter of the meal, and then the focus is on plant-based protein, obviously, so things like soya, pulses, lentils, nuts, seeds. And you can see on the bottom left, it's really important that vegetarians or vegans focus on consuming at least 1 serving of fermented food a day. So that's things like kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, and things like that. Equally, it's really important that they consider supplementing with vitamin D, B12. So we really only get B12 from meat and dairy sources. So vegetarians and definitely vegans should consider supplementing with B12, and iron and zinc obviously may need to be supplemented as well. And on an easy training day, the focus should be on consuming protein-rich snacks throughout the day. So again, there's a moderate training example for vegetarian or vegan athletes. I'm not going to bore you by going through it again, but it's on the handout that Maggie has anyway. So just going to move it on and look at recovery. So the priorities in the recovery phase are firstly to replace lost fluids and electrolytes or salts. So the key electrolytes that we lose are calcium, chloride, potassium, and sodium. And we need to also recover carbohydrate and protein. A lot of the times people neglect carbohydrate in the recovery phase, so it's really important that that is included as well. It's not, protein isn't the only thing that we need for recovery. So recovery drinks are a good option because not everyone can stomach food or a meal straight after games or training. We want to focus on high GI or high sugar carbohydrate in the early recovery phase, and we need to get about 30 grams of protein. We'll look at what that looks like in a minute. So ideally, this should be consumed straight after, but definitely within 30 minutes of finishing training or games. So one recovery option that's really good for all athletes, and most of you have probably heard of it before anyway, is chocolate milk. So it's really good. Obviously, it contains fluid, so it will help with rehydration. It contains key electrolytes that we need to replenish as well. And it also contains 2 types of protein. So it's got whey protein, which is digested and released very quickly to start the recovery within the muscle. And it also has casein, which is a slower release protein, which is digested more slowly and released more slowly. So it'll maintain that protein release to the muscle for a longer period of time. So I've just got a training diet example here. Again, it's on the handout that I've sent to Maggie, so I'm not going to bore you by going through it, but it's there for you all. Okay, so it's based on times. There's options at different times of the day, so it should be useful for everyone. And on the right here, I've just got a recovery drink recipe. So Nesquik powder is really, really cheap. It's €2 or €3 in the supermarket. So if we get a pint of low-fat milk or semi-skim milk with 1 to 2 scoops of Nesquik powder, that's a really good recovery drink that can be taken straight away in the changing rooms after training or games. So it's portable, obviously, it's practical and cheap. And like I said already, it contains a mixture of whey and casein. So just to touch on supplements, they won't make you look like that. So like I said at the start, lots of people think that if they take lots of supplements, that'll make up for a bad diet. That's definitely not the case. Okay, the diet needs to be absolutely perfect. Then again, just to make it very clear, no one under the age of 18 should be taking any supplements. We'll look at that at the end of the presentation. But adult athletes, when they've got their diet optimized, maybe 1 to 2 evidence-based supplements could make a small difference to their performance or help their recovery. So we've looked at 30 grams of protein for recovery. So I'm not going to go through all the examples, but this is what it looks like. So 1 medium fillet of salmon, a medium fillet of steak, a small can of tuna, 5 slices of cheese, 7 heaped teaspoons of peanut butter, small chicken fillet. Obviously, for the adults, sometimes eating isn't always practical. So a whey protein powder, 1 average serving or a 30-gram scoop is 27 grams of protein. So again, there's some really good food options there to promote recovery after training or games or competition. So one thing that people tend to neglect is their rest day. So athletes sometimes just eat the way they normally do on a rest day. The first thing you need to think about is restricting empty or added calories. So any drinks or smoothies or sports drinks that you have on training days, obviously they shouldn't be part of your rest day routine. If you've trained the previous day, then have a normal breakfast because you're still recovering from the previous day's training. So it's really important to keep fuel in your body to help it recover. So you can then slightly reduce the portions of carbohydrate with the rest of your meals. Reduce the consumption of high energy starchy carbohydrate, like we looked at on the easy day plate. And including protein with each meal will keep you feeling satisfied and fuller for longer. And still, even though it's a rest day, remember hydration. So that leads me on to hydration and how to monitor hydration. It's really important that you get a handle on the amount of fluid that you need and then your sweat rate or the amount of fluid that you lose during training. So an easy way to do that is to weigh yourself before training in minimal clothing, weigh yourself after training in the same clothing. Obviously, if you've got sweat or you've got wet from the rain or anything, then dry that off before you weigh yourself. So body mass before minus the body mass after is equal to sweat loss, which is approximately equal to your fluid needs. So for each kilogram of body mass that you've lost, you need to replace that with 1.5 liters of fluid in the 3 to 4 hours after that training session or game. So in terms of dehydration and how it impacts performance, it's really important that we're hydrated at the start of training or games. So if we're not, then our concentration is going to be reduced, our alertness will be reduced. Really importantly, our gastric emptying will be reduced, so our ability to move fluid and carbohydrate through our gut if we're refueling is reduced, so it's going to take longer to absorb that. You can be more irritable, you fatigue more quickly, your RPE, or how hard you're finding exercise, is going to increase. Our substrate use will increase, so we'll burn through our fuel stores more quickly, we'll use our carbohydrate stores more quickly. Your reaction time is going to be increased, so it'll take you longer to react to stimulus. Our ability to regulate our temperature is going to be impacted, and if you're more towards the extreme end of dehydration, you may suffer headaches or dizziness. So in terms of calculating your fluid needs, it's relatively easy. You need about 30 milliliters of fluid for every kilogram. So for a 70 kilogram athlete, they need 2.1 liters of fluid over the course of the day before they do any training, okay? So in terms of some quick hydration tips, in the morning, ensure you start hydrating in the morning. I usually tell people to keep a glass of water beside their bed and just drink that when you wake up, okay? So you're starting that hydration process first thing in the morning. You need to think about regular fluid intake throughout the day, and before training sessions, about 2 hours before, start sipping on a water bottle, so at least 500 to 700 milliliters of fluid. So the easiest way to kind of maintain hydration through the day is just get a water bottle and have it with you, bring it everywhere with you. So during sessions, not all sports lend themselves to this, but you need to be sipping regularly on fluid. So in training sessions, you can incorporate water breaks if necessary, and salty sweaters, or anyone training for a prolonged period, so say 90 minutes or longer, or 60 minutes or longer in heat, water isn't going to be enough, so you need to include sports drinks within that. Then after sessions, we've already gone through the protocol of weighing yourself, so do that, or get in the habit of doing that in training to get a handle on your fluid losses, so you can calculate how much fluid you need to replace after training or games in that recovery phase. So in terms of water versus sports drinks, water is ideal for sipping throughout the day and for training sessions that are up to an hour or less intense tactical type sessions. Whereas sports drinks are useful before exercise to top up carbohydrates. So if you've underfueled or something's happened that day and you haven't been able to fuel properly, then you may need some sports drink in the run up to training or games to try and top up your glycogen stores. During training sessions, for prolonged training sessions, and during competition or games, sports drinks obviously are useful to top up our energy stores. And then after exercise, as part of your recovery, sports drinks can be useful, particularly for those people who can't stomach whole food immediately after training or games. So we've just got 2 quick sports drink recipes. So, excuse me, recipe 1 is 800 milliliters of water, 200 milliliters of fruit squash, and a pinch of salt, which is about 1/3 of a teaspoon, okay? Then recipe 2, 500 milliliters of fruit juice, so unsweetened, no added sugar fruit juice, 500 milliliters of water, and a pinch of salt. So that'll save you a lot of money rather than buying things like Lucozade, Powerade, Gatorade, and it'll also be better for your teeth. So I'm going to move on and look at nutrition and time lost to illness and immunity. So a well-balanced diet provides you with all the necessary vitamins and minerals that the body needs, particularly if you're eating a lot of fruit and vegetables. If you train a lot in a carbohydrate depleted state, that causes larger increases in circulating stress hormones. So we need to be fueled to get top quality out of our sessions. We also need to fuel to reduce that stress that we're placing on our body. Okay, there may, not for younger athletes, but definitely for people more towards the elite or adult athletes, there may be times when you train in a carbohydrate depleted state, but you don't want to do that for a prolonged period of time. An inadequate protein intake will affect immune function. Fruit and vegetable consumption, like I've said, will provide you with antioxidants, on top of the vitamins and minerals that you need. So that helps combat that stress that you're placing your body under when you train. And just some foods that are important for winter, obviously probiotics are really useful in terms of boosting and promoting immunity. So Yakult's only one option, there are other options available. Dark colored berries contain anthocyanins, so they boost immunity. They also help with recovery from exercise. Oats and barley contain beta-glucan, which is antioxidant properties and antimicrobial properties. And garlic contains allicin, which boosts immunity or helps maintain immune function. So I'm going to briefly look at sleep. Sleep is really, really important for everyone, but particularly important for athletes to promote recovery and adaptations from training. So just very briefly, we just got a normal night's sleep here. So an 8-hour night's sleep. So we've got different stages. So we have awake, then stage 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we have 2 types of sleep. So we have NREM sleep and REM sleep. So this NREM sleep, or stages 3 and 4, or deep sleep, is involved in physical recovery. So growth hormone is released in that phase, and that's where all our recovery from training or physical recovery takes place. Then in this REM sleep, it's associated with dreaming and cognitive function and mental recovery. So it's really, really important that we keep a regular sleep schedule, so that we get these sleep cycles every night and achieve good quality sleep. So each of these cycles, so from NREM to REM, lasts about 90 minutes. In terms of not getting enough sleep, there's massive impact on athletes specifically. So firstly, it impacts our energy stores. So there's a reduction in muscle glycogen resynthesis. So the rate of recovery, or how we can recover that carbohydrate into the muscles and liver, is going to be reduced if we're not sleeping properly. Muscle recovery is affected. So we see a reduction in muscle protein synthesis. So the regeneration and adaptation from training is going to be reduced if we're not sleeping properly. There's effects on the central nervous system, so it alters memory, and motor learning, and it really affects immune function. So we become increasingly sensitive to illness and infection if we're not getting enough sleep. And just on that, for teenagers and adults up to the age of 65, most people need somewhere between 7 and 9 hours sleep per night. So just quickly to look at some of my own research. So this is just sleep and nutrition interactions. So on the left-hand side, we've got foods that promote sleep, and on the right-hand side, foods that impair sleep. So high GI or high carbohydrate evening meal promotes sleep. So consuming tryptophan-rich proteins, so things like milk, turkey, chicken, fish, eggs, pumpkin seeds, beans, peanuts, green leafy veg, they promote sleep. Tart cherry juice, which is quite popular, people consume it to help with sleep and with recovery from exercise. It does help sleep. Kiwi fruit also helps sleep, so having 2 kiwis an hour before bed reduces the time that it takes you to fall asleep. In terms of foods or meals that impact or impair sleep, large portions or meals later in the evening affect sleep. So, excuse me, a lot of blood is diverted to the gut to digest those large meals, so that affects how long it takes people to fall asleep. Alcohol obviously impacts sleep, so it's associated with poor sleep quality and quantity, and reduced REM sleep, so it'll affect mental function the following day. And caffeine, obviously, loads of people use it to stay awake, so it increases alertness, and it particularly if you consume it after 4 p.m, it'll increase the amount of time it takes you to fall asleep. So just on supplements, I touched on it earlier. Just to be clear, nobody under 18 should be consuming supplements. The only thing they should sometimes consider is a multivitamin and vitamin D, particularly now during the winter. And then for adult athletes, again, it's a multivitamin and vitamin D. Then once their diet is taken care of and they're eating well, some evidence-based supplements based on their goals may improve performance. So just 5 key take-home messages or goals for all athletes, but specifically elite athletes. Never skip meals. Plan your snacks. Hydrate. Choose nutrient-dense foods, and make sure you get enough good sleep. And just on that, if you're not getting that 7 to 9 hours per night, then a nap sometime in the afternoon, if you can get it in, is useful. Okay.
Thank you very much, Ronan. Another comprehensive presentation there. So thank you for your work on that. We much appreciate it. Our last speakers are Ciara and Shannon, and they're from A Pocket of Positivity, and they will go through mental health and well-being. So over to you, girls.
Thank you. So just very quickly to get started, we'll just touch a wee bit on mental health and more so mindfulness in sport. We'll run through a short activity and then end with a meditation. So mindfulness in sport, mindfulness in general, in its most basic form, it's being in the present moment and it's strengthening that mind-body connection. So it's important in all aspects of life, and in particular in sport, it can make such a difference. And parts have been touched on already. So in any competition at any level, it's only natural that pre-competition stress will kick in. So you'll notice as adrenaline increases, heart rate will increase with it, butterflies, sweaty palms. You'll see all them naturally in many players of all ages. And what we want to do is try and recognize them as early as we can and reduce them. So once we can lower the heart rate, we're saving energy, increase the performance, and reduce then early fatigue setting in as well. So in the performance, you want to ask yourself that question, when you're performing, are you able to stay in the present moment? Or is your mind wandering off? Is your mind flooded with thoughts from the past, from maybe a mistake earlier, or from future outcomes coming as well? Once we're caught in that flood of thoughts, it creates a stress response, and we're not able then to make good decisions, gain composure, or problem solve just as efficiently. So there's three main ways we can bring mindfulness into sport then. And the first one's breathing. So at any moment, it's important if we can include it as much in our daily routine then as we can. So if we take a moment at any stage throughout the day to just sit and watch your natural breath. So as we're sitting here right now, how we're breathing, what our normal rate of breathing looks like. We then want to slow it down. So it's to gain control over the breath. So it's slow, deep breaths, so breathing in through your nose and just slowly exhaling, fully exhaling. And while we do that, starting with maybe 1 minute a day to 2 to 3 and slowly build it up, it's to gain that wee bit of control and composure over our breath, but it also lets us recognize then at times of stress that when our breathing rate changes, and we can catch it then straight away. So if we can gain a wee bit of control daily, it'll incorporate into sport naturally with having a better breathing rate, deeper breathing, but we're able to nip it then in the bud as soon as we notice it. I know Nolly touched on it already, internal and external dialogue. So we want to notice then as well is how we talk to ourselves, but how we talk to others about ourselves then as well. So that'll have an overall impact, be it positive or negative, it'll always impact our performance. So for coaches as well then, for younger players, it's really important that you want to let them notice any feeling or emotion that comes up, to not judge it. Every feeling or emotion will be valid, but what we don't want to do is carry it into the next section of play or the next skill that's being performed. So if somebody misses a shot or makes a mistake, it's only natural in that moment. There will be some maybe frustration, and it's acknowledging that, notice it, and that's okay. But what we want to do then is gain composure back as early as we can, so that our next play, we're in the best position. So find out where you're meant to be, put yourself in the best position for play to continue. You'll find sometimes as people make one mistake, it can spill into 2 and 3. And we want to catch that early so that you're able to recognize the feeling, the emotion, and change it straight away into something positive. And the third one then is a body scan. So we'll go through a body scan in more depth later. And it's one then you can take with you at all times, just that you're able to scan and notice any areas then that you're holding tension or stress in your body and release it then straight away. So with all, particularly with the breathing and the dialogue, we want to be able to notice them. So pre-competition, it's a routine we can get into. Slow, deep breaths to regain control and composure before starting, but also then to give players the opportunity that throughout any game or any performance, that they're able to catch it straight away. So you'll notice stress rising in different scenarios, maybe as time's finishing or as we come under pressure. We want to catch that straight away and have something that we can implement. And the breathing is a great one then to gain control. So ultimately, what we're aiming for is a heightened mind-body awareness. We want to be able to notice any tightness we're holding, any tension, or shallow breathing, and be able to make that change before it has an impact on performance. So the 3 main words to be aware of, we want to become aware of our stressors, reflect on them, and then act accordingly. So we want to become aware, reflect, and act so that we can catch these as early as we can. And the more we practice it, then the easier it comes. Reflect on what's happening and then put an action in place that we're able to, it doesn't spiral into the next play. So you'll find then with yourself and for coaches with younger players, once you improve that overall mind-body awareness, it gives them an increase in confidence. So you want them to know they have full control over their mind and body at all times, and they can. And with putting them things in place for them and for ourselves, that it gives them the confidence, and then in performance as well, that at any given time, they can gain full back control. So it might take some prompts at the start, but the more we practice it then, the more aware we become of it. So we'll do a short activity before we settle down. So particularly important during these times is to take a look at our balance as well. So you'll find in sport sometimes what's happening outside of and other aspects of our life can filter in as well. So we want to take a look just very quickly at our own life balance at the minute. So if you have a pen and sheet of paper in front of you, or your phone or anything at all, if you just take a minute, so if you divide into 2 columns, we want one column with the head nourishing and the other column depleting. So if you just put that heading above each. And if you just take a couple of minutes and list off as many things as you can for the nourishing side that nourish you, that give you energy, things you look forward to, and this is in your full daily routine. So anything you look forward to gives you energy, and on the depleting side, just the opposite. So anything you think that maybe you put off to later, you don't really look forward to, or you don't often feel great coming back from. So if you make a list, so make it as honest and personal as you can. We'll not ask for any feedback on it. It's solely for you. So be as honest as you can with yourself, and list off as many things. So this can be people, places, or things, and it's from your full daily routine. So including your work, any exercise, it can be walking the dog, cooking, as much detail as you can for yourself. So I'll just give you a minute or 2 for that. Now, once you can continue working on that, and once you finish that part, underneath, if you just take a typical week, so if you look at maybe the last week we've had, and in a typical week, if you just write out roughly what's included in each day, or or you can pick just the last 2 or 3 days, even if it's easier. But if you just write down what's all the activities you've engaged in the past 3-4 days to a week. And if you're finished that, just going through your week, if you just look of each activity you've named, if you just put an N or a D beside it or above it for nourishing or depleting. So out of your list above, take a look at the balance. How many nourishing of your nourishing activities have fitted into your week, and how many of your depleting activities take up your week? And as you go through it, you may find you have a balance, or you tip to one side, but it's important at all times and to go back to this one every few weeks, and really take a look at what your balance is in life. Often we can find that the depleting activities can overtake, and then we wonder maybe why our performance in all aspects of life isn't as strong as it has been or we would like it to be. But we want to be coming from a place of balance then as well. So it's an activity you can take a look at any stage, and go back to every so often, because it can be an eye-opener as well, as to what our days. So one day can roll into the next, and we often don't take a look at how much emphasis we put on making sure we have that balance there. So to keep a list to make sure that our nourishing activities are well featured in our week, and if at times we find maybe that a week has been off balance, that we can include them more in the following week and make a more conscious effort of it. So you can take that with you, or if you're not finished, or any feedback on it, you can pop in a question and we will answer. Just aware of time then as well. We're going to move into a meditation, so you can take another minute to finish off there if you're at it. And any questions, make sure and pop them in the box and we'll answer them as well.
Okay, hello everybody. If you want to get comfortable, you can lie or sit or whatever floats your goat. And we'll start the relaxation. We're going to do a body scan today. And I sometimes hear, and it's kind of misleading, that a body scan is about relaxation and helping you sleep. The goal here is just to be aware of your body and the different regions of your body, and allow yourself to experience how each part of your body feels without trying to change anything, but just about really being in your body. We're constantly moving and doing and forget to listen to our bodies. Paying attention to our physical selves is a practice that allows us to care and attend to ourselves at the most basic of levels. So, I mean, when we talk about performance here, we can only perform well in any area of our lives if we're really in our bodies. So, if we get comfortable, we'll start by closing your eyes, making yourself comfortable. And allow your back to be as straight as possible, but not stiff. And take several long, slow, deep breaths, breathing in fully and exhaling slowly. Breathe in through your nose or your mouth, but feel your stomach expand on the inhale and relax and let go as you exhale. Let go of the noises around you. Shift your attention from outside to inside yourself. If you get distracted by the sounds in the room, simply notice them and bring your focus back to your breathing. Slowly bring your attention down to your feet. Begin observing the sensations in your feet. You might want to wiggle your toes a little here and feel your toes against your sock or your shoes, but just notice without judgment. Imagine sending your breath all the way down to your feet, as if the breath is traveling through the nose to the lungs, through the abdomen, all the way down to your feet. and then back up again through your legs, abdomen, lungs, and nose. And perhaps you don't feel anything at all, and that's fine. If you just allow yourself to feel the sensation of nothing. So when you're ready, allow your feet to dissolve in your mind's eye and move your attention up to your ankles, up to your calves, your knees, and your thighs. Observing the sensations you're experiencing through your legs. Breathe into and breathe out of your legs. And if your mind begins to wander again during this, gently notice without judgment and bring your mind back to noticing the sensations in your legs. If you notice any discomfort, pain, or stiffness, don't judge this, just simply observe it. Observe how all sensations rise and fall, shift and change moment to moment. Notice how no sensation is permanent. Just observe and allow the sensations to be in the moment just as they are. Breathe into and out from the legs. And then on your next out breath, allow the legs to dissolve in your mind. And move the sensations in your lower back and pelvis. Softening and releasing as you breathe in and out. And then slowly move your attention up to your mid back and then your upper back. And it's good to be curious about the sensations here. You may become aware of sensations in the muscle, temperature, or the points of contact with the furniture you're sitting on or lying on. And with each out breath, let go of any tension you're carrying. Very gently shift your focus to your stomach and all the internal organs here. Perhaps you're noticing the feeling of your clothes, the process of digestion, or your belly rising or falling with each breath. If you notice any opinions rising about these areas, gently let these go and return to noticing the sensations. Breathing in and out. As you continue to breathe, bring your awareness to your chest and heart region. And just notice your heartbeat. Observe how the chest rises during the inhale and how the chest falls during the exhale. Let go of any judgments that may arise. And on the next out breath, shift the focus to your hands and fingertips. See if you can channel your breathing into and out of this area as if you were breathing into and out from your hands. And if your mind wanders, gently bring it back again to the sensations in your hands and your breathing. And then on another out breath, shift the focus and bring your awareness up to your arms. Observe the sensations or lack of sensations that may be occurring there. You might notice some difference between the left arm and the right arm. Again, no need to judge this. And as you exhale, you may experience the arm soften and releasing tensions. Continue to breathe slowly in and out, and shift the focus to your neck, shoulder, and throat region. This is an area where we often have tension. Be with the sensations here. It might be tightness, rigidity, or holding. You may notice your shoulders moving along with the breath. Let go of any thoughts or stories you're telling yourself about this area. As you breathe, you may feel the tension rolling off your shoulders. And on the next out breath, shift your focus and direct your attention to your scalp, your head, and your face. Observe all of the sensations occurring there. Notice the movement of the air as you breathe into or out of the nostrils or mouth. As you exhale, you might notice the softening of any tension you may be holding. And now let your attention expand out to include your entire body as a whole. Bring into your awareness the top of your head, down to the bottom of your toes. Feel the gentle rhythm of your body and your breath as it moves through your body. As we come to the end of the practice, take a full, deep breath, taking in all of the energy of this practice. Exhale fully. And when you're ready, open your eyes and return your attention to the present moment. And as you slowly become fully alert and awake, consider setting the intention that this practice of building awareness will benefit everyone you come into contact with in the next couple of days.
Thank you, Ciara and Shannon. What a great way to finish the session tonight. Everybody's feeling nice and relaxed and ready for bed. So thank you very much for sharing those tips and relaxation element at the end there. Thank you very much. I think Keith has a question in the chat box there, so if he wants to read it out.
Evening, folks. It's more of a comment, I think, really. Somebody's asking about confidence for young athletes. Maybe just put that out to all our speakers from tonight and say, would any of you have a little bit of advice around confidence for young athletes? And maybe Paul, would you feel like starting first? Maybe if you had anything from your end, go in order of the speakers.
Yeah, well, I suppose on my end, you get confidence from having the work done in a way. So all the things we talked about and not leaving yourself with a mountain to climb in pre-season. So by doing the work you have to do off season, for a young athlete or any level of athlete, you can be confident when you go onto the field that you know you're not going to pick up an injury, and you can be confident that you can actually go as hard as you need to go and so on. So for me, I suppose I would definitely relate back to the physical thing, and it requires you to be at the level, you know, and if you are at that level, you will be confident because you know you have the work done.
Thanks, Paul. Would you have anything to say around confidence for young athletes?
Yeah, of course. So I would say really you can look at confidence two ways. There's proactive confidence and then there's reactive confidence. So with proactive confidence, really the athlete takes responsibility for their own confidence, and they kind of fuel their mind with positive thoughts and healthy thoughts. Whereas with reactive confidence, really the athlete is reacting to how they may feel on a given day. So maybe they'll base their confidence on how they feel, whether they're tired, whether they're feeling nervous. So that's something to be avoided, that reactive confidence, and always going for proactive confidence, taking responsibility for it, and always trying to kind of push yourself out of your comfort zone.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much. Ronan, would you have anything to add from a nutritionalist point of view in terms of athletes building their confidence?
Yeah, thanks, Keith. I just again touch on, echo what Paul said. If you know you've got all your ducks in a row, you've done what you need to do in terms of fueling, you're eating properly, you've practiced what you're doing in training, you feel fueled going into competition, you know what you're going to do to stay fueled, and that breeds confidence, and you know you've done everything you can nutrition wise to impact your performance. So yeah, it's just planning and, you know, organizing what you're going to do in terms of fueling, and then obviously recovery afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, looking back over a lot of sports, confidence comes from playing well, and confidence will start to breed itself. And if you put in the good planning and you do, your preparation is right in terms of nutrition, your strength and conditioning, your seasons, your mental attitude's right, you get your performance right, and then your confidence can come from that. Ciara, Shannon, would you guys have anything else to add just to finish it off?
I think it's sort of just following what everyone else has said. It is creating that routine, maybe that they're comfortable with and happy with. So maybe if it's prior to bigger events or games or individual performance, that there's maybe a routine that they find that they're comfortable with prior to that they feel prepared. So finding maybe where that lack is and giving them the tools to have all that in place, then that you're handing them a bit of responsibility, also with the reassurance then that they're in control as well.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Guys, thanks very much for helping to answer that question and with that statement. Give everybody else an opportunity now. If anybody wants to ask a final question, either just turning on their microphone and asking without the video, or posting into the group chat if you've anything just to ask before we finish up for the evening. And just while we're waiting on somebody to do that, just maybe Maggie, do you want to say a few final words and just thank everybody?
Yeah, thank you so much for everybody that has joined in tonight. We really appreciate all the names on the screen, so we do. So we're very grateful for everybody joining, and we're also really appreciate the guest speakers coming on as well. A very informal delivery, a lot of stuff delivered in the time frame, and I think overall we've learned a lot from this evening. So all the different tools and methods of training and how we cope under pressure and different things like that there has all been very insightful. I want to thank yourself, Keith, and Michael for helping out as well in preparation for this. And then we've got seminar 2 coming up now on the 24th of February as well. So we'll be looking forward to join you all then.
Brilliant. There's nothing's come on in the chat there, and as nobody's turned on their microphone, I think we'll go ahead and bring it to a close. Just say thanks very much to everybody. Good night.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.